The security camera footage from that night was corrupted. All 12 hours of it, according to the police report. They said it was probably a power surge. But I know what really happened in that warehouse on November 15th. I know because I was there. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I survived 3 nights as a security guard at Meridian Storage Solutions. 3 nights that changed everything I thought I knew about what lurks in the dark spaces between our normal world and something else entirely. I took the job because I needed money fast. My landlord was threatening eviction, and night shift security paid double what I was making at the grocery store. The interview lasted 10 minutes. The manager, a nervous guy named Rick, barely looked at me while he talked. The warehouse was massive. 40,000 square feet of concrete corridors lined with storage units. People rented them to store furniture, old photos, Christmas decorations. Normal stuff. Boring stuff. At least that's what I thought. Rick handed me a flashlight, a ring of keys, and a clipboard with patrol routes. He explained the basics. Walk the perimeter every 2 hours. Check the loading docks. Make sure all the unit doors are locked. Radio dispatch if anything seemed off. Simple enough. What could go wrong in a building full of old couches and cardboard boxes? Rick was already backing toward the exit when he mentioned the basement level. His voice got quieter, like he didn't want the walls to hear him. He said the climate-controlled units were down there. Premium storage for valuable items. Art, wine, documents. He handed me a different key. Older, heavier than the others. The metal was warm, despite the October chill. Rick said I only needed to check the basement once per shift, preferably early in the evening. He paused at the door and looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read. He said the basement lights were motion activated, but sometimes they took a while to kick on. He told me not to worry if I heard settling sounds. Old buildings make noise. Then he left, and I was alone with 40,000 square feet of other people's forgotten memories. The first 2 hours passed without incident. The upper levels were exactly what you'd expect. Rows of orange metal doors, each hiding someone's past life. I walked the corridors, checked locks, marked times on my clipboard. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like sleepy insects. Around midnight, I decided to get the basement check out of the way. The stairwell door was tucked behind a utility closet on the north side of the building. The heavy key turned easily, but the door itself took effort to open. It felt like pushing against invisible resistance. The stairwell was narrower than the main corridors. Concrete steps led down into darkness that seemed thicker than normal shadow. My footsteps echoed strangely, like the sound was coming back to me from much deeper than it should. The motion sensors must have been broken because the lights didn't come on. I clicked on my flashlight and continued down. The beam revealed gray walls covered in a fine layer of dust. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been down here recently. At the bottom, I found myself in a corridor identical to the ones upstairs, except everything felt muffled. My breathing sounded louder. My heartbeat seemed to echo off the walls. Even the air felt different, heavier somehow. The climate-controlled units were larger than the standard ones. Instead of orange metal doors, these had white panels with small windows. I shined my light through the first few windows as I walked. Paintings wrapped in protective cloth, filing cabinets, a vintage motorcycle covered by a tarp. Halfway down the corridor, I heard it for the first time. A soft scratching sound, like fingernails on cardboard. It seemed to be coming from inside the walls themselves. I stopped walking and listened. The scratching continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. Old buildings make noise, I reminded myself. Pipes settling, metal expanding and contracting. Nothing to worry about. But when I started walking again, I noticed my flashlight beam was dimmer. The batteries were fresh when I started my shift, but now the light barely reached 10 feet ahead of me. I tapped the side of the flashlight. The beam flickered, got brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. That's when I saw the first handprint. It was pressed against the inside of a unit window, palm flat against the glass. The print was too large to be a child's, too small to be an adult man's. The fingers were spread wide, like someone was trying to push through from the inside. I aimed my failing flashlight at the unit number, B47. According to my clipboard, all the basement units were supposed to be empty for maintenance this month. Rick had specifically mentioned that during the brief orientation. I moved closer to the window and peered inside. My weakening light revealed an empty space with bare concrete walls. No furniture, no boxes, nothing that could have made that handprint. But the print was definitely there, pressed against the glass from the inside. The edges were slightly fogged, like it was made by a warm hand against cold glass. I reached up and touched the window from my side. The glass was ice cold despite the climate control system. The scratching sound started again, louder this time. It was coming from multiple directions now, like a dozen invisible cats were clawing at the walls around me. I spun in a slow circle, trying to pinpoint the source. But my flashlight chose that moment to die completely. Total darkness enveloped me like a living thing. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any source of light. The screen glowed weakly, barely illuminating my own hands. But it was enough to see that I wasn't alone in the corridor anymore. There were more handprints now, dozens of them pressed against unit windows from the inside. Some were small, child-sized. Others were larger, with impossibly long fingers that stretched across the glass like spider legs. They covered every window I could see, a gallery of desperate reaching from empty storage units. I started backing toward the stairwell, using my phone's dim light to navigate. Behind me, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps following me down the corridor. But these weren't normal footsteps. They made a wet, sliding sound, like bare feet walking through puddles. And there were too many of them. Not the rhythm of one person walking, but multiple sets of feet moving in an uneven parade. I turned around, holding my phone high. The weak light revealed nothing but empty corridor stretching behind me. No figures, no puddles, just rows of white doors with their collection of impossible handprints watching me from inside supposedly empty units. The footsteps stopped when I looked, but I could feel eyes on me. Dozens of them, staring from the darkness beyond my phone's pathetic reach, waiting for my light to fail completely. I ran for the stairs. The stairwell felt endless, like I was climbing up from the bottom of the world. My phone's battery was dying, the screen getting dimmer with each step. Behind me, the wet footsteps had resumed, but now they were faster, urgent, like whatever made them had realized I was escaping. I burst through the stairwell door and slammed it behind me. The normal fluorescent lights of the main floor had never looked so beautiful. I leaned against the door, breathing hard, trying to convince myself that what I'd experienced was just my imagination combined with a power failure. Then I heard the door handle turn. I pressed my full weight against the door as something on the other side pushed back. The handle turned again, more violently this time. The metal felt ice cold under my hand, cold enough to burn my palm. Through the door, I could hear them, voices whispering in a language that hurt my ears to process. The words seemed to crawl inside my head and nest there, repeating over and over until I wanted to scream. The pushing stopped suddenly. The handle went still. The voices faded to silence. I stayed pressed against that door for the rest of my shift, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. When Rick arrived at 6 a.m. to relieve me, he found me there, still holding the door closed with my body. He took one look at my face and asked if I'd gone to the basement. When I nodded, he closed his eyes and cursed under his breath. He said he should have warned me more clearly. He said some of the night guards had problems down there, but most people didn't encounter anything on their first night. Rick explained that the basement units weren't really empty. They were sealed for a reason. He said the building had a history, that it was built on the site of an old asylum that burned down in 1962. 37 patients died in the fire, trapped in locked rooms while smoke filled the corridors. He said the storage company bought the land cheap 20 years ago, but they could never keep night security guards for long. People quit after a few shifts, claiming they heard voices, saw things that shouldn't be there. The company eventually stopped renting out the basement units altogether. Rick offered me double pay to stay on, but I was already removing the uniform shirt he'd given me. I handed him the keys, the flashlight, and the clipboard. I told him I wouldn't be back. He nodded like he'd been expecting that response. As I walked toward my car, he called after me. He said if I ever told anyone about what happened, I should be prepared for them not to believe me. He said the security footage always got corrupted on nights when guards encountered the basement. Every single time. I drove home as the sun came up, thinking I was done with whatever haunted that place. I thought I'd escaped cleanly. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I was working the morning shift at a different security job when I got a call on my personal phone. The number showed up as the Meridian Storage Facility. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the other end was whispering in that same painful language I'd heard through the basement door. The words crawled into my head and made themselves at home, repeating endlessly while I tried to hang up. But my fingers wouldn't work. I stood there listening to that horrible whispering for nearly 5 minutes before the call ended. It happens every few weeks now, always from that same number, always the same impossible language that leaves me with headaches for days. I've changed my phone number twice, but somehow the calls keep finding me. Last month, I moved to a new apartment across town. I thought distance might help break whatever connection formed that night in the basement. For 2 weeks, everything seemed normal. No calls, no strange dreams, no feeling of being watched from dark corners. Then yesterday morning, I found something that changed everything again. I was taking my trash to the dumpster behind my new building when I noticed wet footprints on the concrete. The same sliding, uneven pattern I'd heard in the storage facility basement. The prints led from the storm drain to my apartment building's back door. But here's what made my hands shake as I followed the trail. The footprints went up the exterior fire escape, all the way to the 4th floor, all the way to my bedroom window. I'm telling you this story because I don't think I escaped that basement at all. I think something followed me home that night, and it's been waiting patiently for me to realize the truth. The calls aren't random harassment, they're a countdown. And yesterday, for the first time, I understood one of the whispered words. It was a date, November 30th. That's next week. I don't know what happens when the countdown reaches 0, but I know that moving didn't help. Changing jobs didn't help. Pretending it never happened didn't help. If you work security, if you take night shifts in empty buildings, please listen to me. When your supervisor mentions areas you should avoid, places that give guards problems, don't let curiosity get the better of you. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some basements are meant to stay dark. And if you ever find yourself in a place where the security cameras mysteriously malfunction, where the lights don't work right, where you hear sounds that don't belong in the world of the living, run. Don't investigate. Don't try to rationalize what you're experiencing. Just run and pray that whatever lives in the dark spaces between our world and theirs decides to let you go. Because I'm starting to suspect that some of us never really leave those places at all.